The real villain of Vanderpump Rules isn't the loud woman. It's the quiet man who made her look crazy to... Rewatching Vanderpump Rules with the benefit of hindsight is a masterclass in manipulation, and Tom Schwartz could teach the course. The man flinches, cringes, and shrinks on cue every time Katie dares to raise her voice, weaponizing faux fragility to paint her as the loud, irrational woman. It's not emotional discomfort. It's performance art. Schwartz's carefully timed recoil in Season 10, Episode 3, when Katie rightfully calls out his participation in Shanna's podcast, is less about fear and more about optics. The gesture screams, "See everyone? I'm the victim here." And Sheena, ever the eager accomplice, plays her. It's a tired trope, the crazy ex-wife against the poor, misunderstood man. Yet the sheer audacity of how thoroughly Tom and Tom managed to sell this narrative, convincing audiences that Schwartz was the battered spouse, despite his own on-screen aggression, is almost impressive in its cynicism. But the cracks eventually showed. The infamous cop prank peeled back the curtain, revealing the darker undercurrent many had missed. On rewatch, the illusion disintegrates, the smirks, the dismissals, the subtle contempt. The veneer of bashful boyishness conceals someone far more calculating, and occasionally frightening. One scene in particular lingers, the story of the broken front door. A visitor casually asks Katie about it, and she explains, sadly, almost mechanically, that Schwartz broke it down after forgetting Schwartz's behavior throughout the series, his verbal put-downs, physical outbursts, and endless gaslighting, renders the good guy narrative laughable. The way he manhandled not just Katie but her friends, all while maintaining his aw shucks persona, reveals a man acutely aware of his image. It's emotional sleight of hand, and he's disturbingly good at it. Even his exchanges with James during the wedding episodes are textbook manipulation. He dismisses his own misconduct with absurd lines like, "It was a platonic kiss," as if linguistic gymnastics could absolve him of basic decency. The result is less misunderstood nice guy and more performative contrition wrapped in denial. To watch Tom Schwartz now is to study covert narcissism in designer loafers, a man whose greatest talent isn't charm, but the ability to make cruelty look like confusion. Don't call it cheating, call it performance art with a body count. Somehow, Tom Sandoval has managed to turn the concept of romantic gesture into a sociopathic performance art piece. Rewatching Vanderpump Rules Season 6, one can't help but marvel at the moment Kristen reveals she once went through Tom's phone, only to find a text from Ariana saying, "We'll make our own Coachella in my backyard with a boombox." Sweet, spontaneous, human. Naturally, Sandoval later plagiarized that exact sentiment for Raquel's engagement party years later. Charming, really. If emotional theft, regardless of one's feelings toward Ariana, the sheer cruelty of their actions is indefensible. This wasn't a messy breakup. It was a psychological demolition. Let's recap the highlights of this grotesque little love affair. Ariana's dog and grandmother had just died when the affair began. She was already struggling with mental health issues. They had sex in the spare bedroom while she was home. Sandoval dressed as Raquel for Halloween, while she wore a lightning bolt necklace symbolizing their clandestine relationship. Raquel had the audacity to ask Ariana about her sex life with Tom, on camera, while actively sleeping with him. It's less love triangle and more Greek tragedy rewritten by sociopaths with ring lights. The sheer calculation behind it borders on clinical. Even the earlier Rochella engagement spectacle now feels tainted, a surreal prelude to the deceit already fermenting beneath their champagne toasts. Lala once labeled Raquel a stupid demon, which, as it turns out, might have been the kindest possible diagnosis. There's something almost supernatural about how effortlessly these two manipulated not just Ariana, but an entire audience. Watching the scandal unfold was like witnessing a masterclass in deception. Two people so diabolically aligned, they managed to gaslight an entire viewership. And yes, it leaves a mark. Not the parasocial kind where viewers blur the line between fiction and reality, but the existential kind. where you realize the monsters on screen might not be so different from the ones who hide in plain sight in real life. Trust, it seems, is the real casualty of Sandoval. Because if two reality TV caricatures can stage manage this level of betrayal under the glare of cameras, what hope is there for the rest of us? As for the Toms, both of them, let's call it what it is. Two turds in the same designer bag, matching narcissism, interchangeable smugness, and a shared allergy to accountability. The show may thrive on drama, but in this case, it's not entertainment. It's pathology dressed up as passion. They didn't get married for love. They got married because breaking up was less convenient. Tom and Katie's marriage has long stood as one of Vanderpump Rules' great cautionary tales, a living exhibit of what happens when two people mistake shared dysfunction for compatibility. Watching their wedding approach feels less like anticipating a romantic milestone and more like waiting for the Titanic to hit the iceberg everyone already saw coming. The foundation of their relationship was never trust, affection, or even mutual respect. It was inertia. He cheated repeatedly, and she refused to acknowledge her own role in their volatility. Rather than confront the toxicity head-on, they marched down the aisle out of what can only be described as emotional habit. He looked like a man being led to an execution. She looked like someone determined to prove a point. But their dynamic isn't unique. It's just televised. Countless women in their 20s end up marrying men who are, at best, unremarkable, and at worst, corrosive. Society still whispers that a woman's worth is measured in engagements and wedding photos, not in autonomy or self-respect. The cultural conditioning is potent. If a man wants to marry you, you must be desirable. The reality, of course, is that legal commitment to mediocrity doesn't make anyone more valuable. It just makes the paperwork harder when you finally wake up. Katie's eventual awakening, around 35, right on schedule, feels almost inevitable. Many of her peers on the show went through similar disillusionments. Stassi clung to the walking red flag that was Patrick. Kristen ricocheted through chaos. Ariana's patience for male nonsense is legendary but finite. The pattern is familiar. Women settling for men who drain them, all under the illusion of stability. Fear is the true officiant in these unions. Fear of being alone, fear of failure, fear of re-entering the dating pool where disappointment is the default. Add a dash of codependency, a sprinkle of social pressure, and a biological clock ticking like a time bomb, and you've got yourself a wedding. In Tom and Katie's case, trauma played its part. Her recovery from a traumatic brain injury, his fractured family background. They bonded through damage, mistaking mutual pain for partnership. He never truly wanted marriage. She wanted the fantasy of one. Even Lisa Vanderpump, their reluctant officiant, saw the writing on the wall and tried to avoid the ceremony altogether. Perhaps the most fitting metaphor came when Katie told Tom, "Whatever you do, don't give me a ring on a string." Naturally, he gave her a ring on a string, and she said yes. It's difficult to imagine a clearer preview of the years that followed. Ultimately, their marriage wasn't built on love, trust, or even delusion. It was built on the sunk cost fallacy. Too many years invested to walk away. Too many witnesses to admit defeat. The result was inevitable. A slow, public unraveling that confirmed what everyone already knew. Still, in true reality TV fashion, both now seem capable of laughing about it. Growth, after all, is the one luxury they can finally afford. Never trust a man who says, "She'd never do that to you," especially when he follows it up with, "And I wouldn't either." That's not reassurance. That's foreshadowing. Rewatching Vanderpump Rules with full knowledge of Sandoval feels like spotting red flags in a field that's somehow entirely red. The signs weren't just there. They were practically waving themselves. Long before the affair detonated the cast's social ecosystem, Tom Sandoval was already rehearsing his defense, cloaking deceit in performative concern and disingenuous moralizing. Back in Season 8, Episode 9, the infamous Rage Text Night, Sandoval assured James Kennedy that Raquel would never do that to him, with the added flourish of, "And I wouldn't either." A curious statement, especially in hindsight, when it reads less like reassurance and more like a Freudian confession disguised as loyalty. The exchange reportedly came from footage on Sandoval's own phone, making his gall all the more theatrical. Raquel's story that Shiana got her home safely clashes with Shiana's own account that Sandoval did, while James sat up rage texting into the night. So much for never do that. Rewatchers have noted that what aired was likely sanitized. There's an unseen moments quality to the conversation, as though Bravo trimmed around the most incriminating edges. The smugness, what psychologists might call Duper's delight, was hard to miss. Sandoval radiated the satisfaction of someone privately amused by his own audacity. By season 9, the foreshadowing turns almost operatic. At the Sandoval-Madix game night, Raquel's doe-eyed greeting and Sandoval's subtle "not now" gesture communicate far more than dialogue ever could. She stays the night. Later, the rage texts follow. Then comes the wedding reception, where Raquel and Schwartz's makeout becomes a decoy kiss worthy of a bad spy film. Just before she confirms it to Ariana, Raquel glances at Sandoval, and they share a conspiratorial look, a silent, "we're in on it" grin, before he punctuates the moment by smacking her in plain sight of his girlfriend. It's so bold, it borders on absurdist theater. Even Schwartz and Sandoval's banter begins to sound like the chatter of co-conspirators. Smirks, inside jokes, raised eyebrows. An entire language of deceit developed in real time, as though they'd forgotten the cameras were still rolling. The timeline of their connection, too, suggests that the rot set in early. Both working shifts at Sur during Season 7 provided ample opportunity for late-night commiseration over their perpetual victimhood. By Season 8, the chemistry had curdled into something reckless. If the rage text night wasn't the beginning, it was certainly the spark that lit the fuse. In retrospect, the scandal didn't erupt, it simply reached its inevitable conclusion. Sandoval's elaborate moral theater, Raquel's wide-eyed act of innocence, and the silent choreography of their glances all played out in plain sight. What viewers mistook for obliviousness was, in truth, a masterclass in willful denial. The most honest moment in Vanderpump Rules history might actually be its most scripted. Season 2's climactic confession scene remains one of Vanderpump Rules' most unintentionally revealing moments. Not of truth, but of choreography. Kristen's spontaneous revelation about sleeping with Jax unfolds with all the authenticity of a pre-rehearsed soap opera. The way she nearly blurts out the truth while Tom looks stricken suggests not emotional shock, but stage fright. It's almost touching, watching two people desperately trying to act like they're not acting. There are only two plausible readings of that moment. Either Tom and Kristen agreed to manage the damage privately, and Kristen abandoned the pact on camera, or Tom truly had no idea and manufactured composure in real time to avoid looking like the world's most gullible boyfriend. The official narrative insists on the former, but given Tom's famously wooden performances under pressure, it's hard to imagine him improvising so smoothly unless the scene had already been blocked. The whole "we discussed it before" line sounds less like honesty and more like hasty damage control, hastily papering over cracks in the script. Fast forward nearly a decade, and the performance continues, though this time, the props are cosmetic rather than emotional. By Season 11, Katie's face has become the subject of renewed fan fascination. Her lunch with Schwartz prompted debates not about her words, but about her lips. Some viewers mourned the loss of her natural beauty, lamenting the appearance of fillers or Botox. Others insisted she looked great, gloss or not, and pointed out that Botox, for the record, doesn't plump lips, filler does. Katie herself has admitted on her podcast to dabbling in filler years ago, but claims she's stopped. It's the perfect Vanderpump irony. In a show built on image maintenance, even the smallest tweak becomes a crisis of authenticity. Whether it's a secret affair or a syringe of hyaluronic acid, the moral panic remains the same. What's real, what's fake, and does anyone even care as long as the camera's rolling? Katie Maloney isn't the villain. She's just the only one in Vanderpump Rules who actually understands boundaries. And that's exactly why everyone hates her. At this stage in Vanderpump Rules, moral high ground is a currency no one can afford. Yet somehow, Katie Maloney still manages to present herself as the rare voice of reason amid a sea of emotional toddlers. Her sin? Expecting boundaries in a group that treats respect like an optional accessory. Katie's insistence on post-divorce boundaries would sound noble if it weren't so tragically misplaced. She spent years in a marriage defined by Tom Schwartz's habitual infidelity, public humiliation, and spineless avoidance of responsibility. She tolerated it all in the name of love, marriage, or perhaps the desperate need to keep up with her castmates' wedding content. But now, divorced, she demands decency from the same man who never once honored it in marriage. Expecting emotional maturity from Schwartz is like expecting punctuality from Jax Taylor, entertaining but hopeless. Still, Katie's critics miss a point. Her boundaries aren't about control, they're about dignity. After 12 years with a man who could barely manage eye contact during conflict, she simply wanted him not to rub new flings in her face, particularly within their shared friend group. This is not tyranny, it's self-preservation. Schwartz, predictably, interpreted this as an attack on his freedom, a concept he's only ever applied to his right to disappoint women publicly. Of course, the hypocrisy doesn't stop with them. James Kennedy, resident chaos merchant, moved on in 6 weeks and still managed to spend every confessional obsessing over his ex. Yet the cast only seemed scandalized when Katie expressed discomfort over Schwartz's hookups. Selective outrage has always been the show's signature aesthetic. Schwartz himself remains the perennial man-child, a man so allergic to confrontation he's practically translucent. His emotional immaturity masquerades as charm, and somehow people still buy it. Watching him stumble through adulthood feels like watching a toddler attempt taxes. It's not malicious, just pitiful. Katie, for all her flaws, at least engages with her emotions like an adult. She may be sharp-tongued, but at least she knows what decade she's living in. The larger picture, of course, is that none of these people are meant to be liked. Lisa Vanderpump knew exactly what she was doing when she assembled this cast of overgrown adolescents. They exist not to inspire empathy, but to provide the comforting chaos of moral superiority for the viewer. To watch Vanderpump Rules is to realize that being a good person might actually make one unfit for reality TV. As for Katie, her evolution from emotionally battered wife to self-possessed entrepreneur feels refreshingly uncalculated. She doesn't seem desperate for the limelight like Sheena, whose need for validation radiates like bad perfume. Katie simply wants to build her sandwich shop, sip a cocktail, and maintain an ounce of self-respect. After 12 years of Tom's mediocrity, that's more than fair. In the end, the debate over who's right or wrong in this saga misses the point. No one on Vanderpump Rules is right, least of all the ones who think they are. The only real winner is the viewer, who gets to watch these people implode with the self-importance of Shakespearean tragedy and the emotional intelligence of a frat party. Katie's boundaries may be imperfect, but at least she has them. In this universe, that's practically sainthood.